Because her water are broken, they said we'll try to do a natural delivery at the wishes of the mother. And somehow, all of a sudden, the doctors came in and the nurses came in. They're like, okay, we have to have an emergency C-section. Like, what's happening? They're like, if the baby in distress, they're like, yeah. But at that time,
so how did they pick that up from just the meters that were attached to it, or?
I think the stenograph, I guess is that what it's called? I think that was being watched, perhaps. I don't know. It doesn't make sense, to be honest. And when the doctor mentioned the name of the patient, it seemed like the doctor had mentioned the wrong name of the patient. So he was, at that moment, at least carrying a wrong binder. And
interesting.
Anyways, so we went to this emergency C-section. And during this time, in order to extricate the baby while the C-section was happening, it took them 30 minutes trying to extricate the baby. And I think perhaps they didn't make the incision long enough or what have you. And when they did eventually extricate the baby, for 30 minutes, there was, I guess, lack of oxygen that went to, lack of oxygen to the brain, which resulted in what's called hypoxic ischemic encephalopathy. And she was diagnosed with that immediately.
Were you there?
I was there.
Watching it happen.
Watching it happen. And when the baby came out, and I'm going to refer to her as a baby at this point because we had to name her. When the baby girl came out, she looked healthy and what have you, but she was definitely not breathing. She looked lifeless, at least from my perspective. But you thought, maybe at that moment, and they'll try CPR and so on and so forth. So at that moment, you imagine essentially it looked like the entire department of the hospital was there. They tried their level best to do what they can. It was the nurse indicated that this is what baby has. It may be on the lower end. We'll see what we can do, and eventually was transported to Sick Kids Hospital, closest children's hospital. And so we went, So
at this point, the baby is alive and breathing. At minimum?
Yes.
But not responding?
They're not responding at all, not responding to touch, not responding to anything. So we named her at that moment Halima Sadia, from the nurse mother of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And beautiful looking baby, 8-pounder. And she was transported to Sick Kids Hospital. And now my wife is still recovering. She's gone through a C-section and so on and so forth. I'm making a few trips back and forth to Sick Kids Hospital. Again, COVID time. No one can assist. No one can help. You're essentially on your own.
That's right.
Essentially every person for themselves. And so got in there, the NIC, and they're trying their best. And they said that, she was having seizures consistently, I think a dozen or so. And there was still some hope. They said they're going to try different, I think it's called the cold blanket therapy, where you cool down the entire body so that the brain gets some sort of oxygen and what have you. And they tried all sorts of methods until you get that call from the attending doctor, like, hey, daddy, I think you need to come now. I don't think this is going to, go for too long. And so at that moment, I had to take my wife and I went to Sick Kids Hospital. They gave us the baby. We held her, and essentially, she breathed her last in my wife's arm. Mm-hmm. And at that moment, Sick Kids was very helpful in a way. As in, like, they understood. They gave us our own room, and they allowed us to bathe her in the tradition, in the Islamic tradition, change her, so on and so forth. But at that moment, our case did get referred to the coroner's office, so which meant that some investigation had to be done, and because it took place within the hospital environment. It got referred to the coroner's office. They had initially indicated, I think, there's a lot of reports out, right? they were unable to like really pinpoint exactly whose fault and what happened. They had to do further investigation in order to find that out. You know, part of her faith is also to kind of, do the funeral rites as quickly as possible.